One moment I was a powerful federal agent, driving home in my luxury car. The next I was just a black woman, slammed against the hood of that same car by a cop who had no idea who he was dealing with. The Friday evening air was thick with the scent of jasmine and freshly cut grass, the kind of scent that only settles over wealthy, quiet neighborhoods after the sprinklers have done their work. I was cruising home in my obsidian black sedan, the smooth purr of the engine, a gentle hum beneath the soft jazz playing on the radio. It had been a brutal week, the kind of week that grinds you down to a nub, filled with endless meetings, classified reports, and decisions that could affect thousands of lives. All I wanted was a glass of Pinot Noir, a hot bath, and the blessed silence of my empty house. My tailored suit felt like a cage, my heels were a form of medieval torture, and my mind was a swamp of redacted documents. That's when I saw them. The sudden, blinding flash of red and blue strobes painting the inside of my car in frantic, pulsating colors. My heart didn't just seize, it plummeted into the pit of my stomach. I'm a black woman driving a $60,000 car through a neighborhood that is, to put it mildly, not known for its diversity. I knew with a certainty that left my mouth dry that this wasn't about a broken taillight. I ran through the checklist in my head, the same one I'd been running since I was 16 and got my driver's license. Hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. Turn on the interior light. Wait for instructions. Don't make any sudden movements. It's a sad muscle memory litany that has been drilled into people who look like me. I pulled over to the curb, the car coming to a perfect, smooth stop. I took a deep, steadying breath, schooling my features into a mask of calm neutrality. Show no fear. Show no anger. Be invisible. The officer took his time. I watched him in my rearview mirror, a tall, broad-shouldered silhouette detaching itself from the patrol car. He had that swagger, that slow, deliberate walk that's designed to intimidate. His hand rested casually on the butt of his holstered weapon. He wasn't just walking, he was prowling. He stopped by my back passenger window first, peering in, his flashlight beam cutting a sharp, invasive line across my leather back seats. Then he moved up to my window. I didn't move a muscle until he tapped twice, sharply, on the glass with his knuckle. Slowly I pressed the button, and the window glided down with a soft whir. "Good evening, officer," I said, my voice even, professional. It's the voice I use to brief senators. He leaned down, his face filling the open space. He was younger than I expected, with a crew cut and a jaw that looked like it was permanently clenched. His eyes, small and hard, roamed over me, then the car's interior, lingering on my designer handbag on the passenger seat. There was a faint sneer playing on his lips. "License and registration," he grunted, not as a request, but as a demand. "Of course," I replied, my hands leaving the wheel with deliberate, telegraphed slowness. "I'll be reaching into my handbag on the passenger seat to retrieve my wallet." "Just keep your hands where I can see 'em," he said, his own hand now fully gripping his sidearm. I retrieved my wallet and the registration from the glove box, handing them over. He snatched them from my hand. His flashlight beam fell on my driver's license photo, then back up to my face, then back down again. He was taking in my name, my address, just 3 blocks from where we were parked. "Evelyn Hayes," he said, mispronouncing my first name. He smirked. "This is a nice car, Evelyn. Is it yours?" The emphasis on yours was like a slap. My training, my entire career was built on maintaining composure in the face of hostility. I took another silent breath. "Yes, officer." "It is." "And what are you doing in this neighborhood?" "I live here, officer, as you can see from the address on my license." My voice remained level, but a cold fury was beginning to coil in my gut. He ignored me, his eyes narrowing. "Step out of the car, ma'am." My blood ran cold. "Officer, may I ask why? Have I done something wrong?" I said step out of the car. Now. His voice was a low growl. The pretense of procedure was gone. This was about power, my powerlessness and his power. I had seconds to make a choice. I could argue. I could cite my rights. I could escalate a situation that was already balanced on a knife's edge. Or I could comply and survive. Years of training screamed at me to de-escalate. I unbuckled my seatbelt, my heart hammering against my ribs. As I opened the door and swung my legs out, he was already there, grabbing my arm in a painfully tight grip, before I was even fully standing. "Hey!" The word escaped me sharper than I intended. That was all the excuse he needed. He wrenched my arm behind my back, slamming my body forward against the cool, hard metal of my own car. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and my cheek was pressed flat against the recently polished hood. The scent of car wax filled my nostrils. One of my heels snapped, sending my ankle twisting painfully. "You want to resist, huh?" he snarled, his voice right next to my ear, hot and smelling of stale coffee. "We can do this the hard way. I find it's always the hard way with you people." He started patting me down, his hands rough and invasive, moving over my body in a way that was meant to be as humiliating as it was procedural. Then his hand paused on the inside of my suit jacket. He felt the small, hard leather case clipped to the inner pocket. A triumphant grunt escaped his lips. "Well, well, what do we have here?" he sneered, pulling it free. He flipped it open. I heard the faint click of the metal badge inside hitting the leather. I stayed silent, my cheek still pressed against the car, listening to the sound of his partner's car door opening as a second officer finally decided to join the party. The first officer, Miller, according to his name tag, chuckled. It was a low, ugly sound. He thought he'd hit the jackpot. He thought he'd caught me in a lie, a bigger crime than just being black in a nice neighborhood. He held the ID case up to his partner, who was now approaching. "Look at this, Davis," he said, his voice dripping with condescending amusement. "Our girl here is a real big shot. Says so right here." He shoved the open case in front of my face, the silver shield glinting under the streetlights. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. You really think I'm stupid enough to believe you're a Fed?" My cheek was stinging from the rough texture of the car's hood. A dull throb started in my twisted ankle, a painful counterpoint to the sharp, furious pounding in my chest. I could taste blood on my tongue, where I'd bitten my lip. Through it all, I focused on my breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The first rule of a crisis situation. Control yourself before you try to control anything else. And this, right here, was a crisis situation. "I'm not stupid," Officer Miller repeated, his voice a low, threatening rumble. He waved my credentials in the air. "You think you can flash a fake badge and I'll just let you go? I've seen better fakes than this come out of a cereal box. Impersonating a federal officer. That's a serious felony, lady. You're going to be explaining this one to a judge." His partner Davis took a step closer. He was older than Miller, with tired lines around his eyes and a less rigid posture. He reached out and took the ID case from Miller's hand. He didn't just glance at it, he examined it. He felt the weight of the leather, ran his thumb over the embossed seal, tilted the metal badge to catch the light. His eyes flicked from the ID to me, then back again. I saw a flicker of doubt, a seed of professional caution, bloom in his expression. "Miller," he said, his voice quiet, "the seal is right. The photo lamination, it's government grade. Maybe we should just run the number." "Run the number," Miller scoffed, snatching the case back. "I'm not wasting dispatch's time on this. She's lying. Look at her." He gestured vaguely at me. She probably lifted this off someone. The fury that had been coiling in my gut finally solidified into something cold and hard as steel. The time for de-escalation was over. He had assaulted me. He was detaining me illegally. He was about to make the biggest mistake of his short, miserable career. I lifted my head, slowly turning it to look him directly in the eye. The mask of the frightened civilian was gone. "Officer Miller," I said, and my voice was different. The warmth was gone, replaced by a crystalline hardness. It was the voice that made seasoned agents sit up straight. "My badge number is 734 Alpha Delta. The name is Special Agent in Charge Evelyn Hayes. You will address me as such. You have 2 options. Option 1, you get on your radio right now, you run my credentials through the National Crime Information Center, and you await their confirmation. Option 2, you continue with this illegal detention, and I assure you, by sunrise, you will be facing a federal investigation for assault on a federal officer, civil rights violations under color of law, and a career so short you won't even have time to pack up your desk." A shocked silence hung in the air. Even the crickets seemed to have paused their nightly chirping. Davis took an involuntary step back, his eyes wide. Miller, however, just stared at me, his face turning a blotchy red. He saw my words not as a warning, but as a challenge to his authority. He laughed, a short, sharp bark that held no humor. "Special agent in charge? Oh, this is rich," he sneered. "You're in charge of nothing but a whole world of trouble now." He shoved my credentials into his own pocket. "You're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer." He grabbed my wrist, preparing to cuff me. "Miller, wait," Davis said, his voice urgent. "Just run the damn number. What's it going to hurt?" "It hurts my intelligence, that's what," Miller snapped back, not looking at his partner. He was focused entirely on me, on breaking my composure. And now I'm adding resisting arrest to the list. He was losing control completely, fueled by a toxic cocktail of ego and prejudice. He let go of my wrist and turned back to the car. I'm going to search this vehicle. I'm sure we'll find all sorts of interesting things. You do not have my consent to search my vehicle, I stated, my voice dangerously calm. You have no probable cause. Your fake ID is all the cause I need, he shot back. He yanked open the passenger side door and lunged for my handbag, the one he'd eyed with such suspicion earlier. His plan, I'm sure, was to dump its contents on the hood of my car for all the world to see, a final act of humiliation. He grabbed the leather strap of the bag. As he pulled it out, my work phone, nestled inside a side pocket, was jostled. The motion-activated screen lit up the dark interior of the car with an ethereal blue glow. It was just for a second, a fleeting moment. But in the quiet darkness of the suburban street, it was as bright as a signal flare. Miller was too busy fumbling with the bag to notice. But Officer Davis, standing a few feet away, his expression already etched with worry, saw it perfectly. He saw the two words displayed in stark, block letters on the glowing screen as an incoming call tried to connect. He froze. I watched the color drain from his face, his mouth falling slightly open. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. His eyes shot from the phone screen to my face, and for the first time I saw not just doubt, but pure, undiluted terror. He knew. He understood. Miller, still oblivious, finally got a good grip on the bag, and turned back towards me with a triumphant smirk. Let's see what our special agent in charge is hiding in here. Davis, what are you gaping at? Miller snapped, shaking my handbag like it was a bag of groceries. Help me find what she's hiding. Miller, stop, Davis whispered, his voice strained. He took a hesitant step forward, one hand raised as if to placate a wild animal. Her phone. It lit up. The call. I don't give a damn about her phone call, Miller roared, and with a final furious shake, he upended my bag. The contents cascaded out onto the hood of my car with a messy clatter. A tube of red lipstick rolled and came to a stop near the windshield. My keys, a slim leather wallet, a tortoiseshell hair clip, a high-end ink pen, a small packet of tissues. The mundane artifacts of a woman's life, scattered under the harsh glare of the strobing police lights. Miller stared at the pathetic pile, a disappointed, almost petulant look on his face. This wasn't the damning evidence he'd been hoping for. But then something else tumbled out, something that didn't belong with the lipstick and keys. It didn't clatter. It landed with a solid, heavy, unmistakable thud. It was my service weapon, a Glock 19 holstered in a minimalist Kydex rig, standard bureau issue. Miller froze. His smug expression dissolved, replaced by a sudden, sharp intake of breath. The air crackled. The entire dynamic of the confrontation shifted on that one, dense metallic sound. A fake badge is one thing. A civilian carrying a concealed firearm during a traffic stop is a felony. But a federal agent's sidearm lying on the hood of a car next to her credentials, that's not a crime scene, that's a catastrophe. Miller, Davis said again, his voice now trembling. The call coming in on her phone, it wasn't a name, it was a title. It said, "Incoming call, Director Ray." The name hung in the night air like a death sentence. Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the head of the entire organization. Miller's head snapped from the gun to my face. The blotchy red of his anger was gone, replaced by a ghastly waxy pallor. He looked like he was going to be sick. The swagger, the aggression, the sneering superiority, it all evaporated, leaving behind a terrified young man who had just walked off a cliff and was only now realizing there was no ground beneath his feet. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just watched him. I watched the full weight of his actions come crashing down on him. I watched him understand that he hadn't pulled over a civilian. He had assaulted a senior executive in the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country. Slowly I pushed myself off the hood of the car, standing to my full height, ignoring the searing pain in my ankle. My movements were no longer slow and telegraphed to show I wasn't a threat. They were measured, deliberate, and radiating an authority that had been there all along, just waiting to be unleashed. "Officer Davis," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. It was quiet, but it carried the weight of a command. "Pick up my service weapon. Use 2 fingers on the trigger guard. Do not touch the grip. Place it and the rest of my belongings back in my handbag. Then place the bag on the passenger seat." Davis flinched as if I'd zapped him with a cattle prod, then nodded jerkily. He moved with a frantic, clumsy haste, his hands shaking as he carefully retrieved the Glock and gathered my things. He avoided looking at me, his gaze fixed on the ground. My eyes, however, were locked on Miller. He was paralyzed, his mouth slightly agape, his face a mask of dawning horror. "Officer Miller," I said, and he visibly shuddered at the sound of his name. "You have made a grave error. You illegally stopped my vehicle without cause. You forcibly removed me from it. You assaulted me, causing physical injury. You conducted an illegal search, and you have illegally detained me for the last 10 minutes. I took a step towards him, and he actually flinched back. "I run the Violent Crimes Division for this entire region. The very people you are supposed to be protecting, you terrorize. And tonight, you picked the wrong person to be your victim." I reached into the now open car, retrieved my personal cell phone, and scrolled to a number on my favorites list. Davis had finished his task and was now standing rigidly by the patrol car, looking anywhere but at the unfolding disaster. I pressed the call button. It was answered on the first ring. "This is SAC Hayes," I said into the phone, my voice devoid of all emotion. "I am declaring a tactical alert. I have 2 hostile LEOs, badge numbers 714 and 822, City of Northwood Precinct. I've been assaulted. I need a federal response team at my location, corner of Oak and Elm. ETA now." I didn't wait for a response. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. For a moment, the only sound was the idle hum of the car engines. Miller stared at me, his eyes pleading. The reality of what federal response team meant beginning to dawn on him. Then we heard it. Faint at first, a distant, high-pitched wail. But it wasn't the familiar rise and fall of a police siren. It was a single, piercing, continuous tone, the kind used for escorts and high-priority emergencies. And it wasn't coming from one direction. It was coming from everywhere. It grew louder, closer, with terrifying speed. Headlights appeared at the far ends of the street, not just 2, but 4, then 6, converging on our position. They weren't police cruisers. They were sleek, black, unmarked SUVs, eating up the asphalt, their engines roaring in the quiet suburban night. The world exploded in a maelstrom of light and sound. The black SUVs screeched to a halt, boxing us in with tactical precision. Doors flew open and figures spilled out, clad in black fatigues and heavy body armor, rifles held in the low, ready position. They moved with a fluid, terrifying efficiency, forming a perimeter. Red laser dots danced across Miller's and Davis's chests. The quiet, tree-lined street in this sleepy, wealthy neighborhood had just become a federal staging ground. "FBI, on your knees. Hands on your head. Now." The voice that boomed through a loudspeaker was like the wrath of God. It brooked no argument. Davis dropped to his knees as if his strings had been cut, his hands laced behind his head so fast he almost fell over. He was smart enough to know that when men in tactical gear with no police markings tell you to do something, you do it without hesitation. Miller, however, was in a state of shock. He just stood there, swaying slightly, his face a ghostly white under the strobing lights. He looked from the armored agents to me and back again, his mind refusing to process the cataclysm that had just befallen him. "I said on your knees," the voice boomed again. Before Miller could react, 2 of my agents broke from the perimeter, covering the ground between them in a heartbeat. They slammed into him, driving him face first onto the pavement with a sickening crunch. One agent had a knee planted firmly in the center of his back, while the other expertly disarmed him and secured his hands with zip ties. It was over in less than 3 seconds. Professional, brutal, final. A man in a suit, not tactical gear, strode towards me, his face a grim mask of concern. This was Agent Thompson, my second in command. He was a good man, steady as a rock, with eyes that saw everything. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and urgent, his eyes scanning me for injuries. "Are you all right? Medics are on standby." "I'm fine, Thompson," I said, though the adrenaline was starting to wear off, and my ankle was screaming in protest. A twisted ankle, a few bruises. Get statements from both of them, separately. Secure their body cam and dash cam footage. I want their patrol car impounded as evidence. Contact their watch commander and tell him his officers are in federal custody. Do not tell him why. Let him sweat. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, already turning to relay the orders. I watched as my team worked. Davis was being helped to his feet and led to one of the SUVs, his expression one of utter resignation. Miller was still on the ground, a whimpering, blubbering mess as the agents pulled him up. The sneering, aggressive cop from 15 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a terrified boy who had picked a fight with a lion and was only now realizing his mistake. As they hauled him away, his eyes met mine. They were filled with a desperate, pathetic plea for mercy. I gave him nothing. My face was a blank slate of cold, hard justice. The street was now swarming with federal agents. The local residents, drawn by the commotion, were peering out of their windows and inching onto their perfect lawns, their faces a mixture of confusion and fear. This was not supposed to happen here. Thompson returned to my side. "Their watch commander is on his way, ma'am." He sounded agitated. "I'm sure he did," I said dryly. I leaned against my car, finally allowing myself to take the weight off my injured ankle. "Get me the chief of police on the phone." "Right now, ma'am?" "No, Thompson," I said with a hint of tired sarcasm. "Next Tuesday." "Yes, right now." He handed me a secure sat phone from his jacket. Within a minute I had Chief Williams on the line. I'd met him a few times at interagency functions. He was a political animal, more concerned with optics and budgets than with actual policing. "Chief Williams," I said, dispensing with pleasantries. "This is Special Agent in Charge Evelyn Hayes of the FBI." "Agent Hayes? What in God's name is going on? I've got a watch commander screaming that federal agents have abducted 2 of his officers." "Abducted is a strong word, Chief," I replied, my voice dangerously soft. "I would use the term detained pending a federal investigation. 2 of your officers, Miller and Davis, illegally detained and assaulted me tonight, not 3 blocks from my home." The silence on the other end of the line was so profound I could hear the hum of the phone's electronics. Your officers?" he finally stammered. "Evelyn, are you sure? There must be a mistake." "The only mistake, Chief, was made by you," I said, my voice hardening. "It was your mistake to allow a racist, power-tripping bully like Officer Miller to wear your badge and carry a gun in your city. It was your mistake to foster a culture where a man like that feels empowered to pull a black woman from her car and slam her against the hood for no reason other than the color of her skin and the price of her vehicle." I took a breath, letting the words hang in the air. I could practically hear him sweating through the phone. "I am officially notifying you that the FBI is opening a full civil rights investigation into your department. We will be auditing your traffic stops, your use of force reports, your hiring practices, and your internal affairs records for the last 10 years. I will have a team at your headquarters at 8 or 800 tomorrow with federal subpoenas for every last file. Is that clear?" He started to sputter, a flood of excuses and promises about internal investigations and bad apples. I cut him off. "Save it, Chief. You had your chance to police your own. Now it's my turn." I ended the call. The immediate crisis was over. My team was in control. But as I stood there, watching the flashing lights paint my quiet, peaceful street in the colors of a war zone, I knew this was just the beginning. Miller and Davis were the symptoms. The disease was the department itself. I had just declared war on an entire police force, and they would not go down without a fight. They would leak stories to the press, claim I was abusing my power, paint me as an angry black woman with a vendetta. My entire career, everything I had worked for, was about to be put on the line. And as Thompson helped me into the back of his SUV, the first real pang of doubt hit me. Had I gone too far? Had I just made a mistake as big as Miller's? The next morning, the war began exactly as I'd predicted. The local news channels were buzzing. An anonymous source from within the Northwood PD had leaked a carefully crafted narrative. A routine traffic stop had gone sideways, and a combative and uncooperative driver had used her high-level government position to retaliate against 2 decorated officers. They didn't mention my name or my race, but they didn't have to. The dog whistles were loud enough for a deaf man to hear. Abuse of power, federal overreach, disrespect for local law enforcement. The talking heads were having a field day. I sat in my office, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the city, nursing a cup of black coffee and a throbbing ankle propped up on a stool. My desk was already covered in preliminary reports. Thompson stood opposite me, his face grim. "The union is lawyering up," he said. "They're filing a formal complaint against you with the Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General. They're claiming witness intimidation and a conflict of interest." "Let them," I said, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. "It's a smokescreen, and they know it. What about the footage?" A small, grim smile touched Thompson's lips. "It's exactly what you thought. Miller's body cam was accidentally deactivated a few seconds after he initiated the stop, but he forgot about the dash cam in his patrol car. It records audio even without video. And Officer Davis, bless his cautious, terrified heart, his body cam was running the entire time." I felt a wave of cold, hard relief. And And it's a horror show, ma'am, Thompson said, his voice dropping. It captures everything, Miller's language, his aggression, him calling you people, the sound of you hitting the car, your statement about living in the neighborhood, him scoffing at your credentials. It even picked up the audio of Director Ray's call, lighting up your phone. It corroborates every single word of your statement and makes Miller look like a monster. Release it, I said without hesitation. Ma'am? Thompson looked surprised. To whom? To everyone, I replied, leaning forward. Send a copy to the U.S. Attorney's Office, one to the DOJ Civil Rights Division, and one to every major news outlet in the state. No commentary, no press release, just the raw, unedited footage from Officer Davis's camera. Let the public see for themselves what happened on that quiet little street last night. Let them hear it. It was a gamble, it was aggressive, but playing defense was a losing game. The only way to win a war of narratives is to seize control of the story, with undeniable, irrefutable truth. The footage dropped like a bomb. By noon, the story had completely flipped. The anonymous sources in the police department fell silent. The union's blustering statements about decorated officers suddenly seemed obscene. The public saw a calm, professional woman being brutalized by an out-of-control cop. They heard the racism in his tone, the arrogance in his voice. They heard my heels snap. They heard my body hit the car. And they saw, with crystal clarity, the moment of pure terror on Davis's face when he realized who they had just assaulted. Chief Williams tried to hold a press conference to do damage control, but it was a disaster. He was bombarded with questions he couldn't answer. Why was Officer Miller still on the force after 17 prior citizen complaints for excessive force, all of them dismissed by internal affairs? Why was a man with a documented history of racial bias patrolling a diverse community? The chief's carefully constructed political career began to crumble in front of the live cameras. By the end of the week, it was over. Officer Miller was fired and facing federal charges that would likely send him to prison for several years. Officer Davis, in exchange for his full and immediate cooperation and testimony, was allowed to resign and would likely never work in law enforcement again. Chief Williams announced his early retirement, effective immediately. The Department of Justice, armed with the evidence my team had uncovered during our now unopposed deep dive into the Northwood PD, took over the investigation. They eventually brought a consent decree against the entire department, forcing it into years of federal oversight to reform its unconstitutional and discriminatory practices from the ground up. A few weeks later, I was back in my car, driving down that same street. The jasmine was still in the air, the sprinklers were on, but something felt different. The quiet wasn't menacing anymore. It just felt peaceful. My ankle was healed, the bruises had faded, but the memory hadn't. My personal phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Incoming call, Director Ray. I smiled and answered it. Evelyn, his familiar voice came through the speaker. Just read the final report from the OIG. You're officially cleared of all wrongdoing. Not that there was ever any doubt on my end. Thank you, Director. I appreciate the call. You did the right thing, Evelyn. It was messy, it was loud, but it was necessary. You exposed a rot that was poisoning that community. Don't ever doubt that. We spoke for a few more minutes, then hung up. I pulled into my driveway and killed the engine, sitting for a moment in the silence. The battle had been brutal, and I had scars I couldn't see. I had put my entire life's work on the line. But as I looked at my house, my home, in the neighborhood I had earned the right to live in, I knew it had been worth it. Justice isn't always a quiet, orderly process. Sometimes it arrives like a thunderclap, in a storm of flashing lights and righteous fury, tearing down the old and corrupt to make way for something better. And sometimes you have to be the storm.